documentation is done at multiple levels. The first level of documentation is the personal level of documentation. The second level of documentation is the individual level of documentation. The third level of documentation is the departmental level of documentation. The fourth level of documentation is the committee level of documentation. The fifth level of documentation is the faculty level of documentation, and the sixth level of documentation is the college level of documentation. We work at every stage, but we are not able to get into these levels. We are not able to understand for which level are we working, and therefore understanding these levels is very, very important. We start with the first level of documentation called as the personal level of documentation. For example, I am invited by another organization to deliver a lecture in the subject that I teach. This will get recorded as a personal documentation. So, lecture in other college, writing an article on your subject in the newspapers, or for that matter, giving a personal donation to a deserving student, writing a textbook for a publication, getting appointed on a local body, examination paper, senior supervision, squad working for the university, setting up paper, custodianship, all this happens to be personal documentation done by us for us. Some of these areas are counted by the NAC, many of them are not counted by the NAC. Any activity that does not have an acceptable standard comes in personal documentation. There are some areas of personal documentation that now NAC considers. One of it happens to be awards and recognitions at national and international level. If a teacher gets awards in research or gets awards for teaching or for some social work or for some highlighting features that the individual has done, that is counted by NAC in its SSR, that is self-study report. The second aspect happens to be if the person is a member on the important committees of the university, the record gets counted. Now in 2020 guidelines, NAC has considered even the teacher working for examinations of the university and on the other university committees is being counted out. Our research papers are counted. Our books that are written down at national and international level are counted out. This personal documentation is acceptable to NAC, but not all the documentation is acceptable to NAC. The second level of documentation that I made a mention was the individual level of documentation. An individual level of documentation is documentation of the activities conducted in the college for the college. Personal was for oneself. Individual documentation is where college is involved, where your students are involved and where you are working for the college. The documentation of these activities includes the work done by you for your students, for the committees, even faculty or for the college. These very important documents include records and documents made by the teacher. Unfortunately, when we don't have these records, it starts creating a problem. Something very important is that if the documentation is not done that in that time span, we are likely to create a faulty documentation which can cause serious problems. And when we talk of individual documentation, at that time, what all features will be coming? will be provided to you along with the form that is going to come over here. The document that is to be prepared by the leader of the activity, that is you as a teacher, should include the basic details of the program. Second, the brief information about the activity. T3, the proofs and the document that you are going to attach. The fourth part happens to be the number of document that is to be put up. The fifth part happens to be the details as to who has created the document. Let us look into the first part of the document. The first part of the document will be having following details. Number 1, name of the activity. It could be an activity as a guest lecture of an invited person for your subject. So, name of the activity would be a guest lecture, name, title, so and so. Then comes the date, followed by the faculty, followed by the time, venue, whether the activity has been conducted for the department or for a committee, name of the coordinator, that is the one who has written down. What kind of activity is it, whether it's an indoor activity or an outdoor activity. In the present case, it was an indoor activity. And then you are able to see from whom you have taken the support or assistance. It is quite possible that some students have helped you out. It is quite possible that your colleagues have helped you out. Maybe your head of a department has helped you out. These details are extremely important. I am repeating out the details. Date, time, faculty, venue, department or the committee, coordinator's name, number of participants, and with the nature of the activity, whether it is outdoor or indoor. This is the first part. This is the most crucial part. As an IQAC coordinator, what I have sensed out is that in 90% of the cases, some or the other area of these few areas is missed out by the submitting teacher. And therefore, as a leader, as an IQAC coordinator, if you are an IQAC coordinator or you are a head, our first job happens to be to look into these details very properly. What is the name of the activity, whether it is written down or not? What is the date on which it has been conducted? At what time was it conducted? Faculty will be arts, commerce, science, BBA, BCA. If it's a single faculty college, then you don't need to write down, it's just a single faculty. Then it could be whether the activity is for a department or is for a committee. If my department is zoology department, I will be writing down zoology department. Then how many participants were present for that guest lecture? That number is very important, which comes to us from the record that is being created out. So you have to see the record, which makes a mention saying that out of the 100 students, actually 92 students have attended this particular activity. How do we know that record has 92 students? We have a list of students on which we have written down the title of the activity, the date of the activity, then who is conducting the activity, who is the guest lecturer over there, and then you have a list of students, or you have a blank spaces into which the student will be writing down his roll number, his name and his signature. In this way, a record would get generated. Looking at the record, looking at the number, exact number, that let us say it is 92, then that 92 number will be coming over here. And then what kind of activity was it? It's an indoor activity that I have made a mention. I was supported by some student. I have put up these details. Now why write down about support? It is like being honest to what we are doing. Somebody has helped you. It's better to make a mention of it. Otherwise, the next time there is a chance that you may not get a help again. Once we have filled up these very basic details, we come to the second part, brief information about the activity. Here you can always put criteria number. Normally our activities are conducted in criteria. If it's a teaching related activity, it comes in criteria 2 for NAC. If it is a research related activity or an extension related activity, it comes in criteria number 3. If it is some kind of help that you have done to the students with respect to competitive examinations or something of that sort, it comes in criteria 5. If it is related to nature, environment, it comes in criteria number 7. So for teachers, with respect to NAC, I always find either the thing comes in criteria number 2 or in 3 or in 5 or in 7. These 4 criteria play a very important role for the teacher when we are talking about NAC. When teacher is writing down the report, the teacher is the leader because he has conducted the activity for the stakeholders. In this second component, what we are able to see, he needs to make a mention, name of the subject, name of the activity. What is the objective of conducting this activity is the second part that comes in. The objective of the activity should be written down in 2 sentences. Then, what is the methodology by which that particular activity has been conducted? It's a guest lecture, it was a visit, it was a film, it was a to-do activity, it was collection of the garbage or the plastics. Whatever the activity is, the methodology needs to be mentioned out over here. And what is the outcome of that particular activity also should be mentioned. The students became aware about the radioactive wastes that are being generated due to the X-ray machines. For example, that I am making a mention out over here. So you are able to see, we must make a mention of name of the subject, we must make a mention of objective of the activity, we must make a mention of the methodology of the activity, we must also make a mention of the outcomes of the activity. This makes up the second component. The third component is what are the proofs and the details that you are going to submit. This would be notice and letters. This could be student list for participation. It could be activity report. It could be photos. It could be feedback forms. It could be feedback analysis. It will then be news clip with details. It can be certificate. It can be any other. All these need to be attached to this particular covering document. In other words, I am talking about an index sheet that we are preparing for the activity. Once these documents have been attached to it, IQAC accepts the document. The IQAC puts a number on the document. It could be it could be number 1 oblique your initials oblique science or arts or commerce oblique title of the activity. So you are able to see a number is being generated. Now once that number has been generated, that document should actually be listed into the list of IQAC, and then that document can be handed back to you with the intention IQAC telling you that whenever we need the document, we will be telling you the number of the document. You just get the document, show the document. This will help in cutting down on xeroxing or the photocopying of the document. This will also help us in looking into saving of the paper. This will also help us to see to it that the document is being made and is being maintained accountably in the concerned department. And therefore, this first part of documentation, which is individual documentation, really matters the most. Individual documents that come from the teachers are in extremely large numbers. They make up 80% of the documentation. In the next part, we will be looking into the other documentation that we need to create.